Welcome to the Reel Debrief, the show where we dive deep into the world of film production, exploring the genres you love, the projects making waves, and the trends shaping the industry. We're here to give you a 360-degree review for entertainment professionals. So grab your popcorn and get ready for some expert insights. And, well, the occasional bed joke from Talen. It's the Reel Debrief. Now your hosts, Talen and Lisa.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reel Debrief, your favorite place for deep dives into all things cinema. I'm Talen, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Lisa.
Hey Talen, and hello to all of our listeners out there. We've got a great episode lined up today, one that's all about a Hollywood legend who's still out there pushing boundaries even as he approaches 70. That's right, we're talking about Kevin Costner and his monumental new project, Horizon, an American Saga.
Yes, Costner's career has been nothing short of iconic. From his early days as the ruggedly handsome star of Dances with Wolves to his more recent work on the hit TV series Yellowstone. He's made a name for himself as someone who not only acts, but also directs and produces on a grand scale. And his latest project, Horizon, might just be his biggest and most personal endeavor yet. Lisa, why don't you set the scene for us?
Absolutely. Kevin Costner, at almost 70 years old, is still one of those rare actors whose face alone can tell an entire story. He has that timeless, rugged look, perfect for westerns and historical dramas. And over the decades, he's carved out a place in Hollywood that few can match. Let's not forget that this is the man who directed and starred in Dances with Wolves, which won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Costner has also picked up Golden Globes and countless other awards throughout his career. But what's so interesting about him is that, even with all of that success, he's still constantly challenging himself. He just wrapped up a 5-season run on Yellowstone as John Dutton, a patriarch rancher protecting his land, which kind of feels like a role that was tailor-made for him. Yet after that, he didn't just settle into retirement or smaller projects. He went big with Horizon.
Yeah, and when we say big, we really mean it. Horizon, an American Saga, is this sweeping multi-part Western epic that Costner's been working on for over 30 years. It's almost like his magnum opus, right? But here's the thing. Costner didn't just walk into a studio and get a blank check to make this film. He had to finance a lot of it himself, to the tune of more than $50 million.
That's right. Even with all his clout in Hollywood, Costner discovered that no studio was willing to back Horizon at the scale he envisioned. For him, this wasn't just another movie. It was a massive, multi-part story that required a significant budget to do it justice. After countless meetings with Hollywood executives, he realized he wasn't going to get the financial support he needed. And that's where things get really interesting, because at this point in his career, Costner decided to take a huge risk and fund the project himself.
And that move to self-finance his own film puts Costner in the company of some other pretty legendary filmmakers. Historically, a number of iconic directors have had to dip into their own pockets to get their passion projects made. Look at Charlie Chaplin. He self-financed The Great Dictator. Then you've got D.W. Griffith, who poured a ton of his own money into Intolerance. And let's not forget Orson Welles, whose Citizen Kane is often regarded as the best movie ever made. Even he had to hustle to make Othello, putting up his own money to see that project through.
Exactly. It's a long tradition in Hollywood. When the studios aren't willing to take a financial risk, artists sometimes have to go all in on their own dreams. That's what makes this movie by Costner so compelling. He's following in the footsteps of these greats who were willing to sacrifice their own fortunes to make sure their vision was realized. In fact, more recently, we've seen Francis Ford Coppola do the same thing. He sold off part of his wine business to finance Megalopolis, his dystopian epic. It's a reminder that for many of these directors, the love of filmmaking outweighs any financial gain.
Yeah, Coppola actually gave this fantastic quote to Variety where he said, the job for studio executives is not so much to make good movies, the job is to make sure they pay their debt obligations. I mean, it's such a telling statement about the state of the film industry today. For modern studios, financial success often trumps creative risk-taking, which leaves filmmakers like Coppola, Wells, and now Costner looking for alternative ways to bring their stories to life.
And it really speaks to the tension between art and commerce in Hollywood. The studios are businesses at the end of the day, and their priority is making sure the bottom line looks good. But for filmmakers like Costner, it's about creating something lasting, something meaningful. So instead of compromising his vision for Horizon, he chose to fund it himself. It's a massive risk, but also a testament to how much he believes in the project.
So, let's dive a bit deeper into Horizon: An American Saga itself. This isn't just another Western. It's a sprawling narrative that covers a huge swath of American history. I mean, from what I understand, the story takes place over 15 years and focuses on the Western expansion of the United States during the 1800s. Costner has described it as an exploration of how that expansion affected the people who lived through it, from Native Americans to settlers to those caught in between.
Yeah, it's really ambitious. It sounds like Costner is trying to tell a very nuanced story about the westward expansion, which is something we don't often see in mainstream Westerns. Traditionally, Westerns have focused on the rugged individualism of pioneers or cowboys, but Horizon seems like it's going to take a more balanced view. It'll explore the impact on Native American populations and highlight the complexities of that era. It's not just about gunfights and cattle drives. It's about the human cost of manifest destiny.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating is that Costner has been working on this project for over 30 years. It's not like he woke up one day and decided to make a Western. This has been simmering in his mind for decades, and you can tell it's something deeply personal for him. And that's part of why he's willing to take such a huge financial risk to make it happen.
Absolutely. This is clearly a passion project for him. And it's important to note that Costner's connection to Westerns goes way back. He's done Dances with Wolves, Wyatt Earp, and Open Range, all of which have solidified his place in the genre. But Horizon feels different. It feels bigger, both in scale and in its thematic ambition. It's not just a Western. It's a reflection on American history, on the myths and realities of the American frontier.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so interesting that despite his success in the genre, Costner still had trouble securing funding. It's almost like Hollywood didn't know what to do with such a massive multi-part Western. You would think that with his track record, studios would be lining up to fund Horizon, but instead, Costner had to dig into his own pockets to make it happen.
That's such an important point, Talen. Hollywood has changed so much over the last few decades. Studios are much more risk-averse now, focusing on franchises and big-budget blockbusters that are guaranteed to turn a profit. And that leaves less room for the kinds of personal, ambitious projects that filmmakers like Costner want to make.
Yeah, and when you look at the current landscape, it's dominated by superhero films, remakes, and sequels. I mean, those movies are designed to draw in the largest audience possible and guarantee a return on investment. But a multi-part Western epic? Yeah, that's not the kind of project that executives are willing to gamble on anymore, even if it is coming from someone with Costner's pedigree.
Exactly. And that's why we're seeing more and more filmmakers turning to independent financing or even crowdfunding to get their films made. Costner's in a rare position where he has the resources to self-finance a project like Horizon, but for many filmmakers, the studio system just isn't as hospitable to creative risks as it used to be. That's why we've seen directors like Coppola and others financing their own projects. It's the only way they can maintain creative control and bring their vision to life without having to compromise.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? We think of Hollywood as this place where creativity flourishes, but in reality, it's become more focused on the business side of things. And that's left filmmakers like Costner having to go outside the system to make the kinds of films they want to make.
Exactly. And that's where the tension between art and commerce becomes so clear. Hollywood, at its core, is a business, and it's often more concerned with what's marketable than what's meaningful. But for someone like Costner, who has built his career on telling rich, layered stories, that's just not enough. He's not interested in making movies that simply check boxes for profit. He's interested in making films that resonate on a deeper level.
Yeah, that is such a good point, Lisa. I think this whole situation with Horizon speaks to a broader issue in Hollywood today. It's not just about Kevin Costner or his film. It's about the challenges that filmmakers face when they want to tell complex, challenging stories that don't fit neatly into the mold of what studios consider safe. The fact that Costner, with all his accolades and experience, still had to go out and fund this himself, it really says something about the state of the industry.
It definitely does. And I think it also highlights the limitations of the current system. You have filmmakers who are willing to take risks to tell stories that might not appeal to everyone, but are important nonetheless. But the system isn't set up to support that kind of creative risk-taking. It's become much more about playing it safe, about making sure that films appeal to the broadest audience possible, rather than taking a chance on something more niche but potentially more rewarding.
And that brings us back to Costner and the personal stakes he's taken on with Horizon. He's put in more than $50 million of his own money into this project. That's a huge risk, even for someone as successful as he is. It's clear that this is more than just a film for him. This is his legacy, his passion, something he's been working on for over 30 years.
Exactly. You don't pour that kind of money into a project unless it means something deeply personal to you. And what's so interesting is that this isn't just about money for Costner. It's about creative control. By funding the film himself, he's able to maintain complete artistic freedom. He's not answering to studio executives or financiers who might want him to water down his vision to make it more commercially viable. He's making the film he wants to make on his terms.
Yeah, that's a really important point. When a filmmaker self-finances, they're not just taking on the financial burden, they're also giving themselves the freedom to tell the story the way they want to tell it. And for someone like Costner, who clearly has a deep love for the Western genre and for the historical period he's exploring in Horizon, that kind of creative freedom is invaluable.
It really is, and I think that's part of what makes Horizon so special. It's not just another big-budget Western, it's a deeply personal film, one that Costner has poured his heart and soul into. And because he's financing it himself, he doesn't have to compromise on his vision. He can tell the story the way he wants to, without having to worry about pleasing studio executives or investors.
All right, I want to pivot for a moment and talk about the Western genre itself. Westerns have always held a special place in American cinema, and it's clear that Costner is drawn to this genre in a big way. So why do you think Westerns continue to resonate with audiences even today?
That's a great question, Talen. Westerns are such an integral part of American storytelling because they tap into these timeless themes: freedom, survival, the taming of the wilderness, the clash between civilization and lawlessness. There's something very primal about those themes, and they speak to the American experience in a way that few other genres do. Westerns are about more than just cowboys and shootouts. They're about what it means to carve out a place for yourself in a hostile, untamed world.
Right. And I think that's why they continue to resonate, even in the 21st century. There's this mythic quality to Westerns that appeals to our sense of adventure and individualism. But at the same time, there's a darker side to the genre as well. Westerns often deal with the issue of violence, displacement, and the cost of progress. In that way, they're very much about the American identity, both the good and the bad.
Exactly. And I think that's part of what Costner is exploring in Horizon. He's not just telling a story about the westward expansion. He's grappling with the human cost of that expansion, the impact it had on Native Americans, on settlers, on the landscape itself. It's a very nuanced take on the Western genre, one that acknowledges both the grandeur and the tragedy of the American frontier.
Yeah, and that's what I love about Costner's approach to Westerns. He doesn't romanticize the past. He shows it for what it was, both the beauty and the brutality. And I think that's why his films in this genre have always stood out. Whether it's Dances with Wolves, Wyatt Earp, or now Horizon, he's always been interested in telling the full story, not just the myth. So now, what do you think Horizon could mean for the future of Westerns? Could this film help spark a resurgence in the genre? Or is this more of a passion project that stands on its own?
That's a tough one, Talen. I think Horizon could definitely inspire other filmmakers to take another look at the Western genre, especially if it's successful. Westerns have kind of faded in and out of popularity over the years, but there's always been a core audience for them. If Horizon resonates with that audience, we might see more directors revisiting the genre, maybe even with the same level of ambition that Costner is bringing to this project.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've seen a few Westerns in recent years. The Harder They Fall, Old Henry, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, but nothing on the scale of what Costner is doing with Horizon. If this film is a hit, it could signal that there's still a market for large-scale epic Westerns, and that could open the door for more filmmakers to explore the genre in new and exciting ways.
Exactly, and I think the key to Horizon is that it's not just a typical Western. Costner is bringing a modern sensibility to it. He's addressing the complexities of the time period in a way that feels fresh and relevant. So even though it's set in the 1800s, it feels like a film that speaks to the present. If it works, it could pave the way for more filmmakers to experiment with the genre, to tell stories that are both rooted in history but also speak to contemporary issues.
All right, Lisa, so as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts on Costner's decision to self-finance Horizon and what it means for his legacy?
I think Costner's decision to self-finance Horizon is incredibly brave, especially at this stage in his career. He's putting everything on the line for a project that means the world to him, and that's something we don't see very often in Hollywood these days. Whether or not Horizon ends up being a financial success, I think it's already a creative triumph for Costner. It shows that he's willing to take risks, to push boundaries, and to tell the kinds of stories that matter to him. And that's what sets him apart as an artist.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. Costner has always been a trailblazer, and Horizon feels like the culmination of everything he's worked toward through his career. I mean, it's a huge gamble, but it's also a testament to his passion for filmmaking and his commitment to telling stories that have real weight and substance. But regardless of how the film performs at the box office, I think Horizon will stand as one of his most important works.
Definitely. I think it's a reminder to all of us that sometimes you have to bet on yourself to make your dreams a reality. Costner has done that time and time again throughout his career, and Horizon is just the latest example of that.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for joining us, Lisa. And to our listeners, if you haven't yet, keep an eye out for Horizon, an American Saga. It's sure to be something special.
Thanks, Talen. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on the Reel Debrief.
Until then, keep watching. And remember, sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards.
This has been the Reel Debrief. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, like, rate, and review. We'll see you soon on the Reel Debrief.